Okay, hey everybody. Welcome back to Hitting with Holly. We took a little week off last week. I was in Arizona. I was at the MLB Draft Combine. Todd Hollandsworth, he's been traveling all over. He's in Georgia right now at the Lake Point facility. It's a PBR event, 15U National Championship in Emerson, Georgia. Holly's son Trey is participating in that event. So good to be back with you guys. We'll jump right into it. We'll give some observations from Arizona and Georgia. Holly, welcome. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Joe. So good to be with you again. Deep in it, right? It's that time of year. Travel ball's just going on everywhere we are. I'm up here in Georgia, in Emerson, Georgia, and great tournament and great facility. Lake Point is an incredible facility. What a joy for these kids! All these 15-year-olds from all around the country getting to play in one of the nicest facilities I've really ever seen for kids their age. And it's fun to see their emotions. Their eyes light up when they get to see the turf fields and the big walls and the backdrops and the trees. I mean, it is absolutely just breathtaking up here in Georgia. They've figured out youth travel baseball, that's for sure.
No, that's good, and that's going to kind of tie into our theme today. We'll kind of talk about opportunity. We'll talk about the experience of it because you seeing this 15U event. I was just at, like I said, in Arizona with 319 draft eligible players. These were high school and college guys. So an amazing showcase at Chase Field. I was there a couple of days. It was like a week-long event. And again, this is these are once in a lifetime type of opportunities, and obviously baseball is providing these opportunities. Let's start from your end. What is kind of catching your eye at that level at the PBR? They do a great job, and what are you hoping Trey and his team and all the boys should be taking out of this event?
Well, what I probably hope for is, in part because of the life that I've lived and the life God's given me, getting to the major leagues and then kind of working my way back down again to the kids and seeing what the kids are going through. So there are certain things that you kind of pick up along your journey, even as a professional athlete, getting to the big leagues, doing a few things at the big league level, and then kind of maybe working your way back down. But things that I pick up on that I'm not sure everybody else kind of sees it the same way. I know that a lot of these tournaments really do come into kids taking care of themselves, kids worrying about their numbers, worrying about what mom and dad think, because they're spending lots and lots of money for their kids to be part of these teams. What I really do hope for in the organization that my son plays for, which is the East Coast Sox, they really do pride themselves on Joe Caruso. Just does an amazing job teaching team baseball. And that's the one thing that I love. In fact, we had a game earlier this morning, that early game that all the parents, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's the early game. Your kids are half awake. You're awake. You've got coffee in you, yet you're dragging your kid to the field because your kid's still asleep. And he's got to get there on time for a little bit of batting practice before the very early game. And it's so interesting because, you kind of pick up on what wins ball games. And East Coast Sox won their game today 4-0. And really, the one thing that they did right, they out-hit the other team 3-1 in 7 innings. They scored 4 runs. There was a hit by batter. There was 4 walks. There was excellent base running, excellent defense, and really that's the story of the game. So, Joe, really to get to your question, what really differentiates most of these games really is the pitching, is the defense, and is the base running. So it's the 3 things that we generally talk least about when it comes to where you are and what you've been witnessing. Of course, I know the pitchers, and that's certainly one side of it, but the hitters is what I'm talking about. And at this point, a lot of these kids are just now getting, acclimated to the big field, 330 down the lines, 400 to center field or 385 to center field. And the field's a little bit too much for them. The outfielders play a little bit closer, so it's a little tougher to hit. But the good coaches and the good teams are the ones that really learn how to play well together, play good defense. We turned 2 double plays today, clean double plays, which helped us get us out of a couple of jams. Ran the bases generally pretty well, and had just a few more walks than the other team. That's really what defined this ball game. But those are things that I look at, especially at the 15U level, because the bats haven't quite caught up with the pitching quite yet.
Yeah, you got to do a little bit of everything to win a game. But Hollywood, I was thinking as you were talking, and all the years that I spent covering the Marlins, as you know, and being on those backfields for spring training, or seeing complex level or what they called extended spring in the day, where guys would be playing in Jupiter, Florida, on a field that's 100 degrees and at noon, and there's you got to love to play baseball. And when you're playing that, like you say, if you got that 8 a.m. game, that's a mental aspect of the game as well. It's not all perfect for you. You don't have time to roll out of bed when you want, have a big breakfast and have your day. You got to not just get there. You got to be organized. You got to get everything in order, and you got to get ready to go, which is all part of the baseball experience as well. We know it's a game of adjustments, and you adjust to. They say the game's at 8, you're there at 8. The game's at 5, you're there at 5. You get there, and you better be ready to play. So how do your guys get ready to play that early, and what are you noticing about it?
Well, and again, I try to do my best to get my guy up, Trey. I try to get him up early, try to get him moving around, try to get him focused on what he's getting ready to accomplish that day. And I do talk to the kids on his team just about those things. I mean, it's something that is absolutely overlooked, certainly in travel ball, is because these kids don't practice. Their teams don't generally practice a whole lot together. A lot of times kids are coming from all over the country to play on certain teams. Other teams, they're just there to play. And so the camaraderie that you love to see, in team baseball, that concept has in a lot of ways been wiped out. But if you can create it to some extent in travel ball with your guys, you're going to win a lot of games, really. And it does come to that, especially at the 15U level, because much like I just described to you in the game that they played today, it's because these guys know each other. They play well together. They enjoy each other. They do practice together quite a bit, at least as far as the travel ball team is concerned. But they also understand the things that generally win these games. It's not a big league ball game. You're not waiting for the 2 or 3 home runs, and whichever team hits the 2 home runs ends up winning the ball game. That's not going to happen in these games. In these games, it's going to be walks. It's going to be some bunts. It's going to be some execution. It's going to be some timely hitting. But again, I've watched enough of these throughout my years, especially with my 2 older boys, to know at this level and at this age, it really is the fundamentals of the game that generally win these ball games at this level. And the teams who are always standing at the very end are much like the East Coast Sox, who do all those things well. They're not always the best group of hitters, not always. But they always find themselves in these tournaments at the very end because they don't beat themselves on defense. They run the bases pretty aggressively, which you can get away with here at 15U. Because, again, you have a dynamic where you've got pitchers and catchers and all these people coming in from, different places. And the things that you learn at the major league level is that those relationships, and when I mean relationships, I'm not talking friendships here. I'm talking pitchers throwing to the same catcher over and over and over again, knowing how guys work together, knowing how your infielders respond to each other, especially when you're sensing something in a ball game. Hey, this guy's getting too big a lead. We can pick this guy off. Stuff like that. It is fun to watch. And when you see it at 15U, it is pretty unique, but in a lot of ways, it does win these tournaments.
Absolutely. The little things. And, it's kind of funny, and I contrast that for the week I just coming back from Arizona at the MLB Draft Combine. Is obviously it's an individual thing. It's a showcase of your talent. You're not in a team setting per se, but the emphasis you clearly can see is metrics. When the guys are taking batting practice, every ball off the bat on the big scoreboard is the exit velocity, the distance. You run the 30. It's not just the time from point A to 30 yards. It's all the splits in between. They have all the fancy stuff that if a guy ran a 3.7, you saw the first, 10 or so yards was 0.085. At 25, it's 0.2, 0.4. So
Right.
they're measuring every little aspect of you and breaking you down. Obviously it's here to stay. And from a pitching standpoint, spin rate. We talk a lot about chasing velocity, but spin rate they're chasing probably just as furiously. Are you seeing the guys chasing tools, or are they so young and they're just trying to learn the game at the level you're watching now at high school, at the 15U level? Because I'm hoping they allow players to develop before they worry about, hey, that East Coast team is a good team, but they don't have any kids that aren't hitting the ball 95 yet, or not throwing 90 yet.
Well, Joe, and listen, I feel like sometimes, and I know a lot of guys, a lot of guys that I played with, some of the older guys, and, we will get labeled as the old guy, and the game's not that way anymore. I'll just say this, I see the joy in the kids' faces when they play well together. And I don't want to say I have, but I've kind of spoken the ultimate goal, which is for the team to win the ball game, for the team to play well, and for the individuals to play well. Yes, they want to do well for themselves. That's the individual side of the game. But at the same time, they want to win because it also brings that pressure gauge down just a little bit. And that's ultimately what you're trying to do for these kids. We want kids to fall in love with the game of baseball because it's a great game. And, I think of just so many different things in life that, when I was around good guys, or when I was in good clubhouses, or when I was a rookie coming up with the Dodgers with older players everywhere, and Tommy sort of understanding that I was the guy at that time in my life that needed a little bit more covering and a little bit more protection. And what I mean by that was, it wasn't like, hey, listen, you got yourself to the big leagues. You had a nice, great run through the minor leagues, and it's your turn. It was more along the lines like, Holly, we know what you can do at this level, and we're going to do everything in our power to help you succeed. And so I took that from Tommy, and that's kind of what I expressed to the kids. And what do I mean by that? We find small victories. Guy on second base, nobody's out, we're getting him over. And if we get him over, that's just like hitting a double off the wall. We celebrate in the dugout the exact same way. And so what that starts to do is it starts to instill confidence in these young men. And it's not just all about getting hits and doing things that, are not easy to do for a young man, is to even turn around 84 miles an hour, every time. We had one ball today that short hopped the wall from two teams in 7 innings of baseball. One really, really good swing. And everybody else, there were some balls off the end of the bat. There were some, jam shots. There were some pop outs, couple fly balls to the outfield, a lot of walks, a lot of strikeouts. Both kids on the mound are throwing plus 80 miles an hour, but they don't command it. And so, is it in our best interest to teach our kids and teach the youth of America a game that is surrounded by all these metrics before we teach them the game of baseball and where the victories lie? Because there's so many small victories in the game of baseball, and that's what keeps the smile on your face when you're a kid. You may come home 0 for 2, but if you advance the runner or you hit a deep fly ball and the guy was able to tag from second and go to third, now all of a sudden we're finding victories. We're finding victories in our failure. And that's what hitting's all about, everybody. You're going to fail 7 times. The best of us. Tony Gwynn, career, 334, 340 hitter. In his career, he used to say it to me all the time. What are you going to do with those other 7 at-bats where you're not getting a hit? So, it kind of comes down to, how do we find success? How do we find accomplishment? How do we find that pat on the back when things don't necessarily go our way, or I just hit a ground ball to the right side?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely all the necessary points in a game to win a game, which is ultimately what this is about. Holly, are you seeing this? This is something that struck me when I was looking at the combine, and I was there. I had my eye obviously on a lot of the South Florida kids. I did some stories for the Miami Herald. I kind of focused on some players you're probably familiar with, Manny Marin and Laz Calera from Westminster Christian, and Devin Fitzgerald from Stoneman Douglas, and Michael Torres from Doral Academy. And these kids, and Ronnie Cruz from Miami Christian. And what I noticed about our guys, and this is a question that's kind of vague, it's kind of open-ended, and it doesn't mean you're not a baseball player if you didn't do what I'm about to say, but we're trying to define what a baseball player is, what it is to be a baseball player. And I noticed this, Holly, because what they did, even to the point on kind of last day I observed, they did some of the strength and conditioning stuff, some of the medical, and they had it right in the field so you could witness this, where they do various things like something as simple as a grip drill where a player would hold the, basically a hand grip, thing above their head and then grip as hard as they can. They have to do some. The guys are doing various agility, their balance was being tested and all these things. Well, probably 70% of the kids doing that, and then we're talking T-shirts and shorts, we're not wearing a baseball cap. all of our South Florida kids had their baseball caps on until they're told to take them off, including obviously when they ran over and ran the 30 yard, because they kind of transitioned from there, gave them about 15 minutes to stretch, do some, they had a little trainer there to kind of get them ready to run and do a long jump. All our Florida kids had their baseball cap on until literally they got in the block and they take their hat off because they don't really need to run the 30 with the hat on. But our guys all wore baseball caps, and they all were very clean, and meaning, shirt was right, pants were right, socks were right. But again, probably 70% did not have their hats on, including batting practice. Obviously, you're not wearing a helmet because it's being lobbed in. But what's your thought of that? To me, it might be a small thing to some. It might be, me being old. But our Miami guys, our Broward guys had baseball caps on until they were told they didn't need to wear it because of something that they needed to take it off for.
Well, I'm very happy to hear from the South Florida guys. That's great. Part of that is probably the sunshine. We're just so used to playing in the sun all day long. We're so used to a hat behind our heads. I've got the same thing. I don't go to a baseball game most of the time without a hat on, unless I know I'm gonna be in the shade, because that sun will eat you alive in South Florida. But with that being said, that's a big part of what I am, what I believe, and what I stand for as a baseball player and as a former baseball player, as a former broadcaster, the things that I love to see, the things that I certainly pick up on. I love the individual side of the sport. I love that players have a little bit more flair, a little bit more excitement with what they do and what they accomplish on a baseball field. I think that's good. And I'm not talking about bat flips that are ridiculous here. I'm just talking about celebrating the right way. I always thought that maybe we were a little too serious in my generation, but that's about as far as I'll go with anything on that, because I do appreciate that teams look the part. Their uniforms match, their shoes match, their stuff looks together like they're playing a team sport. And, I feel like we really do some of these kids who are getting to the big leagues even now, a bit of an injustice, just because they don't really play a whole lot of team baseball till they get to the big leagues. And then they're exposed, they're supposed to play team baseball, and they don't necessarily understand what you're talking about and what you're expecting or what you're looking for. And it's unfortunate. I had one of my bunting instructors when I was in the minor leagues. Dick McLaughlin was one of the best coming up with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Just a great man, loved baseball, was there before us, left after us. And this was an instructional league. This was during my minor league days. And Dick would always say to us, Holly, here's the deal. You're not going to bunt a lot, but you never know when Tommy's going to ask you to bunt. And it might be your second month in the big leagues. You're struggling a little bit, and he asks you to get a big bunt down. That's why you're going to practice this. And what it really got me to understand, really just even in that small message, was the bigger message that was being delivered, was that the finer things in the game of baseball, which we all seem to appreciate and love and identify with baseball players, we kind of call it the DNA that major leaguers have, is something that really never gets measured until it doesn't show up. And what I mean by that is, he was right. I didn't get to the big leagues with the Dodgers expecting me to drop down bunts regularly, but there came a time where I had to drop down a bunt, but I was ready to do it, and I was prepared to do it. And when I squared around against 92 for the first time in 4 or 5 months, I was able to get the bunt down. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. And when you're teaching kids at this age the simpler things of the game, and when you're learning those simpler things of the ball game, you're going to need them. You're going to need them at some points. You're going to need them in Division I. You're going to need them at some of the better high schools. You're going to need them in life. And you don't see a ton of it here. You don't see a ton of it in travel ball. You don't see it, we're showcasing it. You certainly didn't see it where you were, Joe. But those things are absolutely vital to your career for just about anybody. In fact, I'll give you a story today because it's great. It's one of our biggest guys. And we have a big first baseman. I'll let him remain nameless for now. He's a big kid. He's 15 years old, so he's a big kid in a 15-year-old body. So he's young, and he's got to be probably 6 foot 230. And if he gets into one, he'll hit it farther than just about anybody. But he's got a big swing, and he's trying to figure things out, and he's got a lot of moving parts. But my point in that is this. He came up today. It was a scoreless ball game in the third inning. Lefty on the mound for the other team, throwing, 80 miles an hour. His first at bat, he struck out, struggling a little bit. Went up there, convincingly squared around to bunt, and it kind of threw the other team off in a big, big way. They were like, whoa, their big guy in the middle of their lineup is squaring around. And of course, it's lefty. He's a left-handed hitter, and the pitcher on the mound is left-handed. So we're kind of already talking about a dynamic that is talked about all throughout Major League Baseball, which are the harder ones to navigate, which is that lefty-lefty matchup. When I was playing, we had all these lefty specialists and all these other things going on. But my point is just merely this. He convinced them that he could bunt, and he squared around to bunt, and the guy on the mound all of a sudden lost control. 4 straight balls, walks him. He gets down to first base. Now we got first and second. He hits the next guy. We get a ground ball, a sacrifice fly, and we're up 2-0. But it kind of came down to just really understanding, he didn't get a foreign sign. Like, wait a minute. Whoa, you're asking me to bunt? We're playing summer ball here. He was like, okay, I'm going to do it. Got the sign, squared around to execute a bunt, didn't get a pitch to bunt. But even just the simple fact that he knew what he was doing led to us getting more base runners, led to us scoring a couple of runs and ultimately winning the ball game. And so those things, Joe, are so vital to these kids, because what continues to happen to what I see at the major league level, and it seems like what's the average major league hitter right now, hitting about 225, 230 in the big leagues.
Yeah.
I mean, numbers are just down this year, like across the board. I'm looking through lineups. I looked at a couple big league lineups just the other day. There wasn't an OPS over 800 in the entire lineup. I mean, I'm sitting here going, this is unbelievable. The hitters are just struggling mightily. But I can tell that there's no managers, their hands are tied because they don't have these players who are cohesive and know how to generate runs in other ways. So my point, yes, these things matter. These kids want to be able to do these things. And the more coaches that would begin to just teach this game of baseball for what it's supposed to be. Listen, we all want a lineup full of sluggers. That would be great. Who wouldn't want that? That team coaches itself. But how many people get that? Very few.
Very few. Very few. And again, it's part of it is looking the part, being the part, and just something, like I said, as simple as wearing your hat and, and just looking the part at something like the combine. That told me, because knowing the coaches that we have down here, that it was instilled in them. You're going to be on the field. You're going to have big leaguers looking at you. You're going to have executives looking at you. You're going to be, and part of this, Holly, a big part of the combine was the interviewing aspect, where, the on-field stuff was just kind of eye candy for people like me to shoot video and get the visuals for the fans to expose the audience to who these players are. But the reason those 319 were there was to do their medicals, so to get that out of the way for the league, and then to meet with teams to get FaceTime to make their case. So clearly our kids, and I'm talking about the high school kids specifically, were schooled up enough to know, I'm going to go in there, if I'm going to be meeting with a GM or an amateur draft, scouting director, I'm going to be shaking his hand with a hat on my head and respectful and everything, and that's respecting the game and knowing what you're there for, because it's a business trip.
Respect, integrity, character. Again, it seems like these kids we're in a lot of ways, we're not always putting them in the best position, because all of these things matter, and the kids who are being taught it are so much better for it. Because even if it doesn't work out, those are things that are going to benefit them in their lives, in the business world. It's going to benefit them wherever God takes them next. But all of those things matter in the game of baseball. We talk about it constantly. I hear certain names of certain big leaguers come up, and I have a small circle of guys that I still keep in contact with, and we talk every now and again about certain things. And you'll hear somebody's name come up, and some big leaguers, the name will come up, and you'll hear guys say, like, we wouldn't touch him with, we won't touch him with a 10-foot pole. And it's not based on anything that the individual can do on the field. It has everything to do with all the antics, all the showmanship or lack thereof. And, just the different things, the character or the lack thereof, different things that stand out, because the guy might be that player, he might be that gifted, but if you're bringing him into your clubhouse and he's going to disrupt everything that you're doing, you're not going to trade for him at the deadline under any circumstance, because you have you're going to roll the dice of messing up your clubhouse chemistry. And that is absolutely vital. And that's really what we're talking about, Joe. I know even in summer ball, it's kind of hard to talk about clubhouse chemistry, but we truly do understand that, when you see people and young men who carry themselves with the highest regards and introduce themselves, nice to meet you, sir, shake your hand first, stick out their hand first. We always come away very impressed by those individuals. We say they've got good parents or they've been coached the right way. And those things always have seemed to matter in our sport, going all the way back from wearing our hats straight. I remember Tommy, I'll give you another Tommy story. Tommy used to get on me all the time because Tommy was a lefty, and Tommy and I'm left, 100% left-handed. We all us lefties want to put our hats on crooked. And he would always be the one to tell me, Holly, your hat's crooked. So it was like straight was crooked to me. It didn't look right, but it was never intentional. I just put it on my left hand, and I think I would always pull it over to the side a little bit more than everybody else. But he used to tell me, I got the same problem. But you know what? So-and-so told me this is how it's supposed to be. And so this is how you're supposed to do it. And I was always like, so now I'm always like, even when I put a hat on now, I'm always like, I don't ever want it to look to the left or to the right crooked. I'm making sure that it's straight. And those things absolutely matter, because when it comes to what your team becomes and what you're hoping your college program becomes, what you're hoping your major league team is ultimately going to look like, those things matter. I'm speaking from a guy. This is from a guy who won a World Series. Our 03 group was tight, and even the guys who probably had a little bit more of that looser personality, any of us really changed for them. They kind of changed for us. And when it came together in September and October, that's what I really do believe was the pulse and the heartbeat of our team.
That gets down to the bottom line. You mentioned the key word, team. And, we just had, and, we only got a couple of minutes to go, but our Florida Panthers in hockey just won the Stanley Cup. And what I noticed listening to the announcers talk post game, and they're kind of saying what, their observations. We're talking about the Mark Messiers of the world, guy who won a bunch of Stanley Cups, knows what it's like to be the true definition of a champion. And they talked about the Panthers. At first, they're referring to them as a group. This group of guys. And then they said, no, calling it a group isn't doing it justice. This is a team. This is a team that basically held each other, accountable. They played as one. They all had to pull the rope from the same side. All the stuff that goes into being a team. And I think, what we got to see more of and less of is, instead of having these organizations that are more just pieces that are part of, and meanwhile, their team isn't doing well record-wise, but they'll take their small victories and, well, this move worked, even if these 7 moves didn't work, and they're trying to piece together a winning formula without the cohesion of one, where everyone's playing, yes, for yourselves, because you only want your payday and you want the success on the field. Everyone wants the success on the field, but how do you achieve that? Well, that's playing in a team environment with the common goal to win and win a trophy.
Absolutely the truth, Joe. You said it perfectly. And, I was thinking as we were watching the Panthers ourselves just a few days ago, I thought it was interesting, almost to a man. They talked about what was the key to the Game 7 and winning the Game 7. Of course, they won the first 3 in pretty convincing fashion. And then the other 3, were clearly something changed. Edmonton kind of found their swagger just a little bit and really was getting after them. But, to me, the lesson that was learned, even on my end at the ripe old age of 51 and listening to all of the players really talk about it, wasn't what changed on the ice as much as what their mentality changed in the clubhouse. Almost to a man, they kind of admitted after the first 3 games that they let up a little bit, that there was a little bit of a deep breath, that there was a little bit of listen, we're 1 win away. We've won the first 3. And they kind of got that sense after they got to games 4 and 5, and then even in 6, that there was like this little bit of slip of team energy, team focus, team hockey. And they said that they talked about it a little bit and in the clubhouse, and they were, kind of referring to that, how they needed to get back to the oneness that all of them had in games 1 through 3, and how they really had performed that way all season long, and how it kind of had gotten away from them just a bit. That's the thing, especially in professional sports. You do see it an awful lot, is the teams that get to hold the championship up. They find the one heartbeat, they find the one pulse, they find the one vision, they find the one direction. You mix that in with the integrity, the character, the selflessness that I talk about all the time, that you have to play with when you're saying, okay, listen, laying down myself maybe for the guy behind me is going to set this situation up so that we can go out and win a game today. Those are the things that ultimately matter. And what everybody, the one thing as I've gotten older, the one thing that I really do realize more than anything is that even all the fans, millions and millions of sports fans that we have in our country and around the world, they remember the championships. They'll remember bits and pieces, but they remember the championships, and they remember some of the key ingredients, but not all the key ingredients. You see my point? And that's that's the privilege that I got to experience in 2003, was to be part of something that was so much bigger than just myself. It's not winning the National League Rookie of the Year award, or, going to an all-star game or all that. Those are individual awards. This is the definition of team. This is the definition of the group figuring it out together. And as I've kind of, looked back on my life in sports and all these other, other things that my kids are going through now, I do truly find a lot more joy in seeing the team win the ball game, regardless of what my kids do every day. I think when I first got into this as a dad with three boys, and even my daughter, who's an athlete, you're a little bit more selfish, with the idea that I want my kid to be amazing. I want my kid to be great. I'm gonna send my 3 boys are going to the big leagues, and my daughter's going to do this and that. And what I really realized is that for me, and I hope for a lot of parents, and maybe they maybe take just a little something from what I'm telling them today, is that loving them and being there for them and supporting them through whatever their journey is. And, of course, we're talking about baseball here. If they make it or they don't make it, that should never be the definition of what your love is for them. You should love them anyway and unconditionally. And that's what I think really kids start to appreciate. I had coaches that clearly I was much closer to than others, but that's the one thing, that was the one ingredient that I always felt like was stronger with the guys that I was closer to than the ones that, you just kind of get the sense that, yeah, we're here to win, but, you just do your part and you do your part, and hopefully this will all work itself out. The other side of that is, yeah, we all want to succeed. We all want to be great, but let's all be great together. And that's what I started to really, really learn. And what I found with my boys is that it's really taken a lot of pressure off of them. This idea that I got to live up to whatever dad did, or I got to do what my dad did, or my mom was a great athlete, and I got to live up to those expectations. It's not always fair to put them on it, put that expectation on your children. But as parents, I think we just tend to expect it because we did it. And we think that we have all the key ingredients to their ultimate success. But the reality is, those are all things that they have to figure out for themselves. They just want to know that you love and support them anyway. And that's the key. And that's the one thing that I've really been trying to teach myself here over the last few years, is just to love these kids, teach these kids, and let these kids take it wherever it'll take them.
Oh, that sounds like great advice, obviously in a good spot to kind of wrap this episode up. Holly, when are you coming back? When's the tournament going through?
Week. This is a good tournament. It's an easier tournament. I think it's the kind of tournament that, most parents probably complain about a little bit. I get it. We only play 1 game a day, so there's a lot of downtime. In fact, we had the early game this morning at, I think we started at 10. So we're a little bit farther away from the facility. So we had a little bit of a drive. So we were up early, but the 10 o'clock game, but he doesn't play. Their game tomorrow is at 7:40 under the lights. So they're thrilled and so excited, but we've got 36 hours off. So, we're hanging out, jumped in the pool for a little while. Tomorrow will be an easy day, but we have a night game tomorrow night, which will be an awful lot of fun. But it's part of the journey. So when am I getting back to Florida? It's probably going to be a while, because I think I'm here for multiple tournaments. So I'm on a 2-week road trip to the West Coast, as we used to always say. This is where I would kiss my wife goodbye and say, honey, I'll see you in 2 weeks. And make sure FaceTime, make sure your phone's charged, because we're communicating on the phone a lot more than we are in person. So these kids, boy, they're getting introduced to travel. But travel ball is like big league baseball, a lot more than we think it is.
Absolutely. Well, if you get any hitting videos that you can put together in downtime, those would be appreciated as well. But with that, we'll hook up definitely for next week. Enjoy this week. Good luck to Trey and the rest of the boys, and then to everyone competing there. Enjoy their time. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. Please like, subscribe to the channel. We're growing this. The Hitting with Holly's aspect is a big part of what we're growing here at Man on Second Baseball on the channel, and we're going to have a lot of fun with this. And hopefully, you're our audience, so we'd love your input. Topics you want to hear about, please in the comments section. Give your thoughts and your ideas and what you like, what you don't like, and we'll try to address that as well. With that, thanks for tuning in. We're going to sign out of this edition of Hitting with Holly, and we'll catch you in the next video.